What is the Constitution? Chapter 5, A Battle Between North and South. Was the arguing over now? Definitely not. The delegates had settled that population would determine how many members each state would have in the House of Representatives. However, there was the terrible issue of slavery to take into account. At the time, there was about 500,000 people in bondage in the United States, almost all of them living in the southern states. Southern plantation owners depended on slaves' unpaid labor to farm their fields of tobacco, rice, and cotton. Slaves had no rights. They were considered property, not citizens of the country. They couldn't vote. Yet, if they were counted in the southern state's population, that state would get many more representatives in the House of Representatives. Of course, that's what the southern states wanted. However, the thought of southern states gaining more power in Congress because of their slaves made northern delegates furious. Many of them hated slavery and spoke out against it. Even several farmers who were slaveholders, including George Washington and James Madison, hoped slavery would end. Luther Martin of Maryland declared that the dishonorable slave trade went against the principles of the Revolution. George Mason of Virginia said slavery brought the judgment of heaven down on a country. Slavery also went against the Declaration of Independence, which declared that all men are created equal. But Southern delegates made it clear that they would leave the Constitution if the new Constitution outlawed slavery. And without the South, there would be no nation, much less no Constitution. So the issue was whether slaves should be counted as part of a state's population. Once again, the delegates struck a compromise. They agreed that the Constitution would say that each enslaved person was counted as 3/5 of a person. If you read the Constitution, the word slaves never appears. The delegates avoided using it on purpose. Confusing words such as other persons were used instead. The word slavery was hid away in the Constitution, said the 16th President Abraham Lincoln, just as an afflicted man hides away a cancer which he dares not cut out at once lest he bleed to death. The compromise over slavery kept the convention alive and made it possible to have a constitution. Delegates who hated slavery felt their hands were tied, yet the Constitution, so successful on other ways, utterly failed African Americans in bondage. Slavery after 1787. The Constitution also stated that the slave trade had to end in 1808, but that only meant that no new slaves would be brought into the country. By 1808, however, there were more than 4 million enslaved people in the United States. The issue of slavery never went away, and kept splitting North and South further and further apart. Finally, the United States did break apart in the Civil War, which took place between 1861 and 1865. The Union won the war, and slavery was forever banned.